Can you tell the bee story?
Oh, when the wasps got me.
Yeah.
That was a horrible one, man. That was it was the last tree I ever trimmed. Actually, it landed right in the bridge of my nose, right in my glasses. It just got me right in the bridge of my nose. It's like ah. So I kind of fell, and I actually when I fell backwards, and I kind of crumpled underneath the tree, and the chain came down, and I was upside down with my back to the tree, just hanging by the safety chain.
Yeah, so in the demo days, was there any equipment specific training that you wish you had access to back then? This was the late 90s, early 2000s.
Everybody else had little forklifts and trailers and trucks, and I was trying to innovate and be a little different and stand out from the crowd. I could literally drive in the plant with the machine on my back, unfold the boom, and set it in place up to 30 feet away.
Wow. Do you remember the single heaviest self-contained piece of equipment that you ever had to move?
Yeah, and it was horrible. It was like the worst 3 days of my life.
Really?
Yeah.
What's the biggest blind spot in your estimation that your customers might have?
Oh, that's easy. Not doing the hands-on evaluation. It has to be site specific and equipment specific.
What was your first job in the heavy equipment industry?
My first job in the heavy equipment industry was working for my dad and driving big forklifts, and occasionally I could pull a big crane around to the wash rack, and I kind of got to run the wash rack for in the summertime, and got to operate all the equipment starting from when I was literally like 12 or 13.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it was not OSHA compliant to have a 13-year-old on a forklift.
No, and big ones. I mean, we had a 36,000 pound heister, and I could just barely see over the steering wheel and just barely reach the pedals. And Dad was like, "Yeah, you're fine. You can drive the little one. You can drive the big one. Just don't hit anything."
Dang. Yeah, I've seen those heisters. Those are the ones with the big dualies on the front.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And it had a big mast and big long forks, and it was freaking gigantic.
Did those big ones have pneumatic tires or were they solid?
They're pneumatic tires. They're just regular truck tires, most of them. But they do make them with cushion tires that'll pick up like 60,000 pounds.
Holy smokes.
I was just talking to an old crane buddy of mine I had lunch with on Monday, and we were talking about those. They're called a VersaLift, and they made them so the counterweight you could push a button and it would slide backwards and make it would extend the center of gravity backwards, rear the lift with a big giant counterweight, and you could adjust the size of the machine and the capacity of the machine by moving this giant counterweight. It's really a cool machine, and there's not many of them around, but they're very very handy for crane and rigging and moving machinery and stuff like that. So
Wow. Yeah, I see I'm looking at pictures of them. They're really cool looking. That's super cool. So that was your first job in the heavy equipment industry when you were literally a teenager.
I think I may have been preteen
Wow.
actually. Yeah.
Okay. And then what was the first business you started in the heavy equipment industry?
In the heavy equipment industry was DMX. But the first ever business I ever started was a tree trimming business,
Tree trimming.
palm tree trimming,
Yeah.
climbing up with the spikes like the poles, the telephone poles, and doing stupid things and climbing all the way to the top. And that was at my dad's suggestion. He always thought that those guys did pretty well and made a lot of money in a short amount of time if you were willing to climb to the top of a palm tree and trim it.
Yeah, I remember you saying like your buddies would work all week and you would work like one Saturday and have the same payout.
Yeah, like literally one Friday afternoon, I could go out and knock on doors and hustle, and say, "Hey, can I trim those trees?" and get the job, do the job, and be done with it by 5 or 6 o'clock on a Friday and make $300 in a few hours. And those guys would work like 2 weeks part time to make $300.
Yeah, that's wild. And then you can you tell the bee story?
Oh, when the wasps got me.
Yeah.
That was a horrible one, man. It was the last tree I ever trimmed. Actually, it was a pretty big one, and it wasn't one of the tall, skinny ones. It was one of the bigger, round ones, and it had a pretty big beard on it. The beard is all that dead stuff that hangs down the bottom. There's probably a name for it or whatever, but it can be dangerous when those things fall. A lot of times tree trimmers like me will get killed because they crawl up underneath that stuff, and then it'll just slide down the trunk of the tree. It'll just take off in just one big chunk and slide down and smother the guy, and he can't get out, and they suffocate. It happens regularly. But anyway, I was up there hacking away, and I pushed them to the side, and they were all dead and dried. So I had a Corona 42-inch saw that folds out to 42 inches, a big curved, really sharp saw, and I put my elbow right into a wasp nest. And the wasp nest, they came out, they got mad. He nailed me in the arm, and then in the elbow, and on my wrist, and on my hand, and on my forehead, and on my face. And the last one that I remember, it landed right on the bridge of my nose, right in my glasses, because all I was wearing was sunglasses. And I could just see I crossed my eyes, and I could see his little butt just arch down and just go, ew. It just got me right in the bridge of my nose. It's like, ah! So I kind of fell. And I actually, when I fell backwards. And I kind of crumpled underneath the tree, and the chain came down, and I was upside down with my back to the tree, just hanging by the safety chain. And I mean, it was really hard to just keep myself up and to keep myself from panicking. And the lady comes out, and she's like, "Oh my God, are you okay?" And I'm like, "No, I'm not okay. This is bad. I'm still getting stung." That reminds me of the scorpion story. Oh, geez. So I'm still getting stung, and she's like, "Well, I'm going to call the fire department." I said, "No, it's okay. Let me try one more time." And I just, with all the muscle I could muscle in my body, I wrapped my legs around the tree trunk in like a chokehold, a figure Kimura or whatever, locked my legs behind it and hoisted myself up with the chain, got it tight again, and caught myself, and then climbed down the tree. And that was the last palm tree I ever trimmed. It was, but I did a lot. I trimmed a lot of palm trees, a lot of palm trees. It was
Dang.
good money when you're.
So when you're hanging upside down, the safety chain is attached to your arms, right?
No, my hips.
Oh,
I got
okay.
spikes. I got spikes on my legs. You clamped around my just below my knee, and
Mm.
underneath a big steel shank underneath my Vask hiker 2 boots and shorts, and just a t-shirt, and then a belt that goes around your waist, and then chains that go around the tree, and then hook in on both sides, and you can adjust the chain for whatever size you need to be.
Oh my God. So no
Yeah.
no fall protection harness.
No, I guess kind of the chain and the spikes were I guess yeah, it was really bad. It was stupid. It was just dumb.
What's the scorpion story? I don't know if I've heard that one.
Did the same thing. It was kind of a similar situation. I started pulling down the dead stuff, and it was kind of coming apart. And I was like, "Oh, this is great. This is great news. I'm going to pull this thing out and get all the dead limbs to come off, easily and quickly, and fire them down." And 'cause I got to where I could float them and fly them down right into my trailer. I had this trailer that I pulled behind my Blazer. So I could kind of fly them into the trailer if I could get the trailer close enough. So I was flying them in there, and I pulled a big chunk out, and like 10,000 tiny scorpions, this big, little clear, tiny scorpions, just swarmed all over my body, all down my shirt and my pants, and everywhere. It was unbelievable. I don't think I really got stung that many times, but it was really super scary.
Oh my God. Yeah, because the baby scorpions, they're born with a finite amount of venom, and then they lose it throughout their life. So the baby ones are the most venomous.
But I don't know if they really were strong enough to actually sting me.
Hmm.
You know, I don't know.
They're just
I
the
only
little
got it a
guys.
few times, and it didn't really bother me. I've been stung by scorpions a number of times, so.
Dang, that's brutal. So when you first started DMX, that was a demolition company. Was OSHA in the forefront of anybody's mind at that time?
Sure. In the early '90s, Everybody knew about OSHA. Wasn't really a big thing in Arizona per se compared to other places in the country, but it definitely is in your forefront of your mind. It's always been a thing. It's something that started, I think, in the 60s or 70s, and I should know that, but I don't. And it's actually yeah, 100%. You don't want to hurt people, and you sure as hell don't want to get fined and cost yourself or your customer a lot of money.
Yeah. Yeah, so in the demo days, was there any equipment specific training that you wish you had access to back then? This was the late 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah, at that time, like learning to operate a crane was something that was just handed down, like, literally generation to generation. In Arizona, they had a very strong operating engineers union that worked with the Association of General Contractors, and those union relationships are always very fluid. I was just talking to my friend in the crane business this week, actually, and we were talking about the unions and the impact it's had on his business. So that's been a source of training for people to learn how to drive cranes and stuff. But it would have been nice to have a more formal training accessible. The training is always out there, but I was a small business. I was just a scrappy startup. I started with a pickup, and then I bought a truck, and then I bought a crane, and then I bought more trucks and more forklifts and that kind of deal. So it was. I never really had the opportunity to have a really formalized safety program, and we were small enough. We got away with it. There was probably times when we were doing things we shouldn't have done, but we, eventually it became really important to me, especially in 2000 when I got a letter from an insurance company.
Yeah. And so that's detailed in the Certify Me About Us video that people can check out. We'll link to that. Like how that started, how Certify Me started. So can you tell me about the Knuckle Boom? That was my favorite piece of equipment when I was a little kid.
The Knuckle Boom, that was the one that my friend Dan, my mentor, loaned me a ton of money so I could buy that thing. I was 32, and it was expensive. It was several $100,000. It was a really cool piece of machinery. It was a Ford truck, and it was a 26,000 pound capacity flatbed, and it had this knuckle boom right behind the cab that would reach out 34 feet and pick up 42,000 pounds, which was pretty astonishing when you think about it, that this thing would just fold up like a knuckle behind the cab, and it was really, really a cool piece of machinery.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to find a picture of the old Knuckle Boom. I think there's one in your old photos.
Yeah, the old effer. We did a lot of crazy stuff with that thing too, but it never let us down. It was awesome.
That was like your main equipment for moving heavy stuff.
Everybody else had little forklifts and trailers and trucks, and I was trying to innovate and be a little different and stand out from the crowd. What a surprise. And so I went a different route, and Dan loaned me the money to buy that crane because I really did. It paid off because there were so many jobs, like chiller jobs and boiler jobs and industrial plant equipment jobs, where I could, it would fit under a standard 12-foot door or 14-foot door, and so I could literally drive in the plant with the machine on my back, unfold the boom, and set it in place up to 30 feet away, big ones.
Wow.
So it was kind of a different way of doing it, and yeah, it kind of freaked people out when we started doing that.
Yeah, that's so cool. So, do you remember the single heaviest self-contained piece of equipment that you ever had to move?
Yeah, and it was horrible. It was horrible. It was like the worst 3 days of my life.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe we don't talk about the worst 3 days of your life.
It was in Tracy, California, and we were hired by these guys that we knew, this electrical contractor, and they had 3 of these things to put in. But the last one, they couldn't get the crane close enough. They couldn't get the trailer close enough, and so they kind of dumped it off to the side as close as they could to the pad, and it was a 475,000 pound transformer. So you can imagine the trailer that it took just to haul a 475,000 pound transformer, and the crane that it took to pick the transformer off the trailer and set it down. The first 2 they were able to set on the pad, no problem, easy, easy, squeezy. The third one, there was just no access. It just was really cramped. So they set this thing on the ground right over the spoil of when they excavated the foundation for which you can imagine for a 475,000-pound transformer. And it went really deep in the earth, and it had all these conduits coming out of it, and it went down probably, I don't know, I'm guessing 10 feet. So the hole that they dug to dig this giant foundation for this giant ass transformer, all the spoil they just put over to the side and put over to the side, and they kind of compacted it down, and not really. So then they set the transformer down right on top of where a lot of the spoil went. The spoil went kind of all around it, and it was wet, and this thing was sinking, and we had to figure out a way to jack it up out of the mud and get it up onto the pad. And we had I think 12 pallets of 4x8s, and 4x8s no, excuse me, 6x8s, and 6x8s are oak, and they're 4 feet long, and I think we can get 52 of them on a pallet. And we had 12 of those because we knew we were going to need a lot of them to build a platform to get underneath of this thing so that we could put dollies under it and then drag it up over onto the pad. Well, it was sinking in the mud, and every time we were trying to jack it up, we're just driving these pallets, this rigging, the cribbing into the ground. And I think that day, because you got to, they're solid oak, they weigh probably 40 pounds a piece, and just shucking them all day long, just shucking them in, shucking them out, trying to jack this thing up to get our platforms underneath it so that we could roll this thing. And I'll bet I chucked 700 crib blocks that day. And it was horrible. We had to keep going. We finally quit after like 16 hours. And people were puking, and we snapped a boom off a VersaLift. It was really horrible. But we finally got it to stabilize and got our aluminum planks underneath it and rolled it over. And literally collapsing in the mud from exhaustion.
Dang.
That was a bad day.
That was a bad day. That was a really bad day.
That was a really bad day.
So then you thought to yourself, maybe it might be time to start one of them internet businesses.
Well, I was always struggling to find a way to find the equipment. I'd go to a job, go to an auction or something, and there'd be like riggers from LA, riggers from as far away as Denmark, or, all over the country, all over the world. And they all had different ways of doing things, and they all had different equipment, which I thought was really amazing. I'd see these guys, and I'm like, hey, where'd you get those rolls? And like, where'd you get those cool rollers to put underneath the machinery to roll them around on the floor and, to where you can move them? And they're like, yeah, Circle K, where do you think? Nobody wanted to just say, because they don't want to give a competitor an advantage,
Mm-hmm.
So I just dug and finally started putting it together and found a lot of it. And my mentor, Dan, always told me, if you're going to consume something, you might as well become a dealer for it. And so I became a dealer for a lot of this stuff, and then I put it on the internet in '97.
RiggersSupplyCo.com.
RiggersSupply.com. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
And so that was selling pieces of equipment. Was it auction style?
No, it was just rigging equipment, dollies and jacks and, come-alongs and tuggers and I had a deal with Aerogo, these really cool air mats. They could they're in planks of aluminum, and they had air pucks underneath them like hovercraft, and you hook them up to the air source, and you can float and just like we used them to move an injection molder a few times. And it was like a 150,000-pound injection molder. And we got this thing balanced out perfectly on these air dollies, and like one guy could literally just push it around by hand. It was crazy.
Wow. Like a little hovercraft.
And then we had a section on the website to get people to come back. I was like, we have to give them a reason to be interested in it. And we put up classified ads for cranes, just for cranes. And within 6 months, there was $250 million worth of cranes for sale on that site.
Dang.
And we were selling stuff every day, and it was nutty. In '97, taking a credit card on the internet was a brand new thing, and distribution chains and and distribution channels were not really set up for guys like me selling stuff everywhere, everywhere all at once. So
Right. Yeah, that's actually one of the questions I written down is like, what other online businesses were around in 97?
I don't know, man. I mean, you literally would just like you get on Netscape or something, and then we would like link it to something, and there were
Hmm.
no search engines. They were just like shopping bots that were like would compare prices, and that was before they started calling them search engines. They were calling them shopping bots, so you could
So
compare stuff.
when you would go to these rigger sale events and talk to people, did you have a little card with the website on it that they have to type in manually? HTTP.
Yeah, yeah. And we went to one trade show, an industrial or a facilities manager trade show,
Hmm.
and that was it. But yeah, just type it in. You go to the internet, type it in,
Go to the internet.
and people started linking to it. It was crazy. It really was nutty.
That's really cool.
We had to, make a deal and collect the money and then purchase it and then arrange shipping and, the whole thing. It was just a lot of rigmarole, and the stuff was all heavy. I mean, one of those big, tank style rollers, like an 80-ton, Hillman style, a tank style roller weighs 120 pounds, and they come in a set of 4.
Yeah. Did you have to estimate shipping or did you like
No, we
pre-quote
knew
it
what it
all?
was, but it was just way more hassle to just
Yeah.
handle it and do it. And it was a great business, but if I had kept it going, it probably would have turned into something big. But I did something else.
You did Certify Me.
It did certify me.
So when Certify Me started, was Google around at that time?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, yeah,
So then, is that how people found out about it in the early days?
yeah. And there was just all these funny little SEO tricks you could do in like 2003 and 2004. And I'd have to look up the dates, but when Andy Jenkins was doing Stomper.net, Andy Jenkins later went on later to found Kajabi.
Oh wow.
But he and Perry and those guys were all doing the Stomper.net, and it was an annual event. And they were doing it in Atlanta. I think they did it 2 or 3 times.
Mm.
And I think that was like 2005, 2006. I'd have to find out, but yeah, we started getting involved in Google SEO in like 2003, 2004.
Right on.
Mm-hmm.
And then, do you remember the first big name customer that you were really excited about that you had?
Yeah, Placement Pros. They were a big staffing company.
Oh, cool.
That was our bread and butter for a long time. And they would call. My partner would sign up all the students in our system for them, and then we would just bill them monthly. So I had a real white glove concierge, program for them,
Hmm.
and they did a ton of business with us for a long time.
Yeah. When did you decide to start offering area lift certifications as well?
That was like 2005,
Mm.
2006.
You saw the
Uh,
similar equipment need for similar customers.
People were calling saying, "Hey, what about airlifts? What about airlifts?" And we're like, "Okay, well, let's try airlifts," and it
Mhm.
took off, and people were glad that they found a solution for that, and they've been using it ever since, just like forklifts.
And then, how does like crane licensure work to become a?
It's super complicated. That's just like a whole different thing.
I imagine. Does DOT regulate that?
Yeah, DOT and the CCP. There's a certified crane operator program. There's the unions. There's
Hmm.
OSHA. There's lots of layers of compliance with cranes. It's very
Yeah.
complicated. It's a very, very good business, but it's a tough business.
Yeah. The last one might be interesting. So, for your audience, what's the biggest blind spot in your estimation that your customers might have?
Oh, that's easy. Not doing the hands-on evaluation. That has to be site specific and equipment specific.
Hmm.
Easily the biggest blind spot. The only time we get a call from OSHA is when they're looking at a certificate and they say this is incomplete, and we say yes, it is incomplete. And if you turn it over on the back, it says what is required to make it complete. And if those documents aren't readily available, they probably didn't occur. So that's how we do it.
Yeah.
And the first time an OSHA guy called was probably 2003 or 2004. And when he was done, after we explained the program, he's like, "Oh, that's great. That you're part of the solution, not part of the problem. That's fantastic."
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that's a big one.
and that's literally the half a dozen times maybe that it's happened where a newer OSHA person is in a plant and they're like looking at our documentation of training and certification. We'll call, and it's just like I said, very randomly and very spread out. But their eyes at the end say, "Oh, well, okay, yeah, great. That's how it's supposed to work." They say, "Yes, yeah, we know. That's how it's supposed to work."